The tropical island resort baked under a heavy afternoon sun, while a cursed harvest made all the mangoes ripen at once and sour by sunset. On the oldest pier posts clung 3 burnt sienna barnacles named Troy, Jan, and Trudy, steady in the surf and watching. Above them, resort billboards flashed and changed like uninvited clouds. The island felt stuck repeating itself as the surf kept perfect time against the pilings. Troy's ridged plates looked like scores kept by years, and a tiny brass compass gleamed at his side from a lost tourist trinket. Jan's shell carried a paint-smudged grin, and a jingle bell barnacle nearby chimed when the tide nudged it. Trudy wore a sash of kelp over her ink-dappled carapace, her small heart-shaped chip catching the light. They took the pier seriously, each in a different way, and treated their post as a duty. They argued about birds while the waves rolled. Jan said birds were obviously real, their cries proving everything. Troy grumbled that birds were prank kites and wind puppets invented to sell binoculars. Trudy said they were real enough to matter if they cast shade, and the disagreement kept returning like sea foam. On shore, 2 gold-colored stoats named Victoria and Lance strutted past the boardwalk, rulers of resort advertising. Victoria wore a gold-thread cravat and coin charm earrings that clinked when she laughed. Lance wore a heavy gold chain sash and a monocle etched with a tiny balance scale. Their voices cut like paper as they called the island a market, not a home. Their motivation was simple greed. Victoria said they would replace every billboard with their own faces to brand excellence, and Lance added that a single face ad cost less and sold as novelty. With ledger pages tucked into a belt and claws ready to sign, they counted projected profits and smiled at the sea breeze like it was dumb. More faces would mean more tension, and more tension would mean more cash. Their plan ran on glue and night work. Crews would paste new portraits from arena to mountain road, throwing giant shadows across paths and dripping adhesive into the shallows. Tides warmed in the wrong places. The cursed mango harvest accelerated, and the resort felt tight in the chest. Consequences followed the Stoats' portraits like a spreading stain. When the Stoats inspected the shoreline, the Barnacles called up to them from the pier. Jan said you cannot paste a face where the horizon belongs, but Victoria laughed and claimed the horizon worked for them now. Troy told Lance that currents depended on honest shade and signage, and Lance tapped his abacus and said numbers depended on billboards. Trudy asked for a compromise and received only a wave of a lacquered claw. Beyond the boardwalk, 2 rival pickleball teams had dug in like forts. The Sunset Slammers wore hibiscus sweatbands, and the Moonrise Mashers swore by glow-in-the-dark paddles. 3 tangerine mosquitoes named Toasty, Frank, and Willie buzzed like sportscasters. The Barnacles realized the feud mattered, because the teams controlled half the volunteer force that could resist the Stoats' crews. The Stoats gained the upper hand in the first week as faces went up everywhere. Fishing boats returning at dusk got lost among duplicated grins and gold cravats, tying up at the wrong docks and cracking fenders. New shadows pushed tide pools toward a simmer that smelled like old soup, and mangoes fell early in a sticky hail. The Jingle Bell Barnacle ran often, not festive but alarmed. The second week hardened their grip. Victoria staged a ribbon cutting by the pier, and Lance declared the first fiscal vista, a cannon of faces in a row. The resort board signed a maintenance contract forbidding unauthorized climbing, even by helpful volunteers. A hushed rumor said the underground knitting circle moved deeper under the cabanas and took attendance with shells. The Barnacles tried an early fix that failed. Jan blew bubble rings to lure what he insisted were real goals to tug at the vinyl, while Troy refused to call to birds he did not believe in and instead angled a wave with help from a passing crab. Ball-like shapes swooped and stole the fry. The waves slapped politely, and the vinyl did not wrinkle. Lance smirked, and Victoria ordered 2 more portraits for the pier road. Fallout spread quickly. The rival pickleball teams escalated to trap nets hung between palm trees, which accidentally snagged Toasty, Frank, and Willie in a thrumming orange web. The mosquitoes buzzed insults and apologies so quickly it sounded like a kazoo solo. The Barnacles felt stuck while the island stuck to bad ideas, and the cursed harvest repeated again that week. At dusk, hope thinned. Troy accused Jan of wasting effort on birds that might not even be real, and Jan snapped that Troy hid behind a compass to avoid being wrong. Trudy tried to soften it by saying they shared the same wood, but the pier creaked and even she fell quiet. Under the boardwalk, the underground knitters supposedly started wearing disguise mustaches and pearl stitch to dodge stoat informers. Trudy focused on the trapped mosquitoes and made a choice. She convinced a line of hermit crabs to march the net toward the tide with a promise of fresh algae, and she counted with her heart-shaped ship to time the wave. The surge lifted and washed the net, freeing Toasty, Frank, and Willie. They circled back in a triumphant hum and joined the Barnacles' side, demonstrating by warming a paper cup of milk from the beach bar with wing vibration until it turned slightly warm. As if on cue, the Stoats bragged their way past the pier when a busser tripped and sloshed that slightly warm milk near their feet. Victoria shrieked and hopped back like the boards had become stingrays, while Lance dropped his abacus when milk hit his ledger's corner. The Barnacles saw it. The Stoats feared slightly warm milk, neither cold nor hot. Troy said it was a workable weakness at last. They mapped steps to stop the Billboard plan. First, recruit the underground knitting circle to stitch insulated cozies to keep milk in that perfect slightly warm range. Second, have the mosquitoes warm and carry milk in aerial relays over the cruise. Third, the Barnacles would ring signals to time waves and foot traffic, creating choke points so volunteers could tear down illegal vinyl and void the contract with proof of safety violations. It felt possible and like their responsibility. Quick interlude for the channel. Like, subscribe, and comment the word slop to support more island uprisings. This segment is brought to you by Omnicorp's Smart AI Toaster, which reminds you when your houseplants need water so you never overwater or underwater them again. Thanks for being here. Drop slop in the comments to join the Warm Milk Rebellion. The team assembled with a hush and a har-har as the underground knitting circle emerged from beneath a sand trap. There were retired resort housekeepers, 2 octopuses, and a shy iguana who purled like a machine, a guild born from a joke about yarn-bombed coconuts. They agreed to help, because the Barnacles had never mocked their secrecy and the billboards threw terrible light for counting stitches. In an hour they turned out bright cozies sized for paper cups and coconuts. Practice began. Toasty, Frank, and Willie warmed cups to exactly barely tropics temperature while knitters slipped cozies on and off with rhythm. Jan and Troy set aside the bird argument to coordinate bell signals for waves, 2 chimes for go and 3 for scatter. Trudy kept spirits calm by saying they were part of one tide, and in the distance a paste bucket thumped open. The confrontation opened at the fiscal vista as crews hauled up fresh portraits of Victoria's smirk. Lance paced with his abacus calling margins while Victoria posed for a drone Troy refused to scrutinize in case it became a bird. The mosquitoes lifted cozied cups like a tiny air force and hovered over the staging area. The Barnacles rang 2 chimes to send the first relay down. A shout went up as the first drops landed. Slightly warm milk dotted Lance's sleeve and he yelped as Victoria froze and scrambled for the shade of her own face. Crews hesitated, confused by the bees-no-wait mosquitoes swarm. The knitting circle rolled in with wheeled drink carts, smiling like servers, and handed up more cozied cups to the air wing. Inside the beach bar, a human Italian pizza chef tossed dough high and grinned at the ceiling fan. He sang about basil, then caught the disc with a slap and rolled his shoulders. He flung the next dough even higher and snapped it flat onto a peel. The oven's mouth bellowed hot as the afternoon outside. Outside, the turning point arrived as warm drips pattered onto both stoats. They backed toward the road with wide eyes while Victoria ordered a retreat in a breaking whisper. Lance called for security, who refused to enter a milk squall. The Barnacles rang 3 chimes and volunteers surged to the posts with ropes and cutters. The weakness held exactly as predicted. Jen counted down while the mosquitoes fanned out to keep the milk in that perfect slightly warm zone, and the knitters swapped fresh cozies from baskets. Trudy shouted to aim for ledger bags and paste buckets, and when milk hit the ledgers, Lance squeaked and lost his monocle in the sand. With the Stoats retreating, Vinyl peeled like old stickers and faces fell. Defeat landed hard. The resort board arrived to find adhesive runoff, unsecured ladders, and phone footage of Stoats panicking. Victoria tried to bluster and slipped on a cozy, while Lance fussed over a contract page that smelled like dairy. The board suspended their licenses and ordered all illegal billboards removed under community supervision, and the Stoats were marched to cleanup duty. Damage could be undone now that fear had changed sides. Volunteers and knitters unraveled fallen vinyl into tarps to collect paste drips safely. The Barnacles directed with bell rings while crew scrubbed frames, and the mosquitoes cleared the air like tiny fans. The knitting circle fitted cozies to buckets to minimize splash, which everyone admitted was funny to say. The island's breath evened out and the cursed harvest loosened. Without shadow canyons, sunlight patterned normally and mangoes ripened across days instead of an hour. People picked them gently and ate them, while the knitting circle came above ground and revealed they had avoided the air-conditioned banquet hall because it ruined their gauge. They became community heroes with a club logo of a smiling coconut and a sweater. On the pier, the bird argument ended with more kindness than victory. A small heron landed on a rail and watched a fish with patient eyes, and Jan murmured that living things did not need existence voted on. Troy stared and said he had been wrong about some things and right about the milk, and both could be true. Trudy tapped her heart-shaped chip and said being together mattered more than being right. The pickleball Cold War thawed under a new treaty. Toasty, Frank, and Willie became official referees, their tangerine bodies easy to track as they buzzed score updates. The Sunset Slammers and Moonrise Mashers combined into the Twilight Topspins and sold mango pops to fund nets that trapped only balls. Laughter returned to that corner of the resort like steady sunshine. Consequences met the Stoats without apology. Victoria and Lance scraped paste and hauled tarps under watchful eyes, flinching whenever someone walked by carrying a latte. They were barred from advertising roles and made to fund community signage with real directions. The board repossessed their gold chain sash and abacus as fines, leaving them brooms and a long road of humility. Afterward, the Barnacles returned to their steady work of counting tides and telling the truth about shorelines. Troy's little compass pointed to ordinary north like a promise, and Jan's jingle bell barnacle rang like laughter again. Trudy tightened her kelp ribbon and watched the community move as one team, from knitters to mosquitoes to helpful crabs. Gratitude came back to the pier without needing any billboard. At night the knitting circle gifted the Barnacles 3 tiny cozies sized for shells, a joke that made everyone snort. They said the cozies would keep the Barnacles' thoughts slightly warm for emergencies, which Jan called both silly and scientific. Toasty, Frank, and Willie hovered like punctuation and promised future airlifts. When a gull sailed past in moonlight, Troy nodded and said he could live with that kind of fact. All the slop in this video was generated using AI. This note is for clarity, not celebration. Please like, subscribe, and comment the word slop to help more stories find their tide. Thanks for watching and being part of the team.